Hello, thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are kicking off a 14-day challenge learning piano from scratch. Every single day we're going to have kind of mini tutorials, lessons that you can play along with. If you didn't catch yesterday's video, I'll link to it here. Do start there because there we cover the absolute basics that you really need to know before today's lesson makes sense. So work through that one first, come back here. If you want to try to start with today, that's fine. Just know that if you get lost or if it moves too fast or there's anything that you don't understand that you've never seen before, refer back to that longer form lesson and then you'll have everything that you need to start with day one of this challenge. There is a workbook linked for you below in the description. Be sure to grab that and print it out or use it on your iPad, and that will be really foundational to being able to follow along. We'll have one of those every single day to get you through this challenge. And then two more things before we dive right in. There are two things that can really set you up for success in this challenge. The first is schedule these sessions. Sit down, get out your calendar, mark every single day that you're going to be doing them. If you don't have 14 days in a row, that's absolutely fine. These are going to live on YouTube. They're going to be here forever, and you can schedule it out as you want. But do get all 14 days marked in your calendar so that you know exactly when it's an appointment, it's non-negotiable. Having a plan for when you're going to show up is going to set you up for success. The other thing that's maybe a bit more fun than scheduling is invite a friend to do this challenge with you. Learning is so much more enjoyable when we're doing it in a community. If you have someone working alongside you, you're going to be making even more progress. You're going to hold yourself accountable for showing up, and you're going to get the most possible out of these sessions. Without further ado, let's move over to the piano. The first thing we're going to work through is this C major improvisation. I will show you the pattern. I'm going to play through it 3 times. I am going to be saying the names of the notes just the first time through. I would encourage you to say them every single time that you're playing this, at least in the beginning. Unless you feel that you already know the names of the keys on the piano and you're able to find them quickly, I would really encourage you to just, because it adds another layer of depth to how well you know these notes. You're going to learn them faster and you're going to find your way around the piano more automatically. The other thing I want you to know about these videos is I've designed them that you can absolutely play along with me on the first time through if you feel comfortable with that, or you watch me play, pause the video, and then you play. Or the nice thing about YouTube is you don't have to do this in real time. So you can watch, copy, and then try to play along if you want to try doing that as well. So we're starting with our right hand thumb on C and our left hand 5th finger on C. And we learned this pattern already, so I'm just going to name the notes as I go through. C, E, G, C, E, G, A, C, E, A, C, E, F, A, C, F, A, C, G, B, D, G, B, D. And let's do that 2 more times. Now, the cool thing about this exercise is it gets you used to playing every single key on the piano. And what I mean by every single key on the piano, we obviously didn't play every single of the 88 keys. We cover the entire musical alphabet because we really want to be able to recognize and find them quickly, automatically. I have a whole other video on finding the keys more automatically if you want to check that out. But now, for now, don't leave yet. For now, we're going to practice some patterns together. Today, we're going to be working through the keys in groups of 3 notes. So we're going to start with C, D, E, and I'll give you a second to find it before I show you. C, D, E. And so go ahead and pause the video, find that everywhere on the piano if you want, and then we'll move forward with our next group. Our next group is going to be F, G, A. F, G, A. And then finally, A, B, C. So we have a little bit of overlap, but that's good because that just means that you're practicing the notes more and you're learning them in chunks, you're getting used to finding them. This is all really good for helping you out. If you have troubles finding A, because it is kind of mixed into the middle of the 3 black keys here, if you ever have troubles finding that, start from C and play the pattern backwards and then start finding it in the ascending pattern. Every single day in this challenge, we're going to be doing rhythm drills, and I really, really encourage you not to skip over this. It might be tempting, it's not a popular topic, but you're going to get so much out of these if you follow through on them. So basically, we're just going to, every single day, we're going to review the types of notes that we have in the patterns, and we're going to clap and count together. You can clap and count alongside me, or as always, pause the video and then do it on your own afterwards. This is something that I would actually encourage you to just do alongside the video. You don't need to pause, because if you're doing it alongside the video, you're also going to notice if you're staying with me or not, which means that you're going to notice if you're actually staying in the rhythm, if you're actually keeping this steady beat. So I would encourage you to clap alongside the video. So before we start, our first measure here until the first vertical line is just quarter notes, which means that each of the notes gets 1 beat. In the next measure, we have 2 half notes. Half notes, if you remember, get 2 beats. Then we have another measure of quarter notes, and then at the very end, we have a measure that's just a whole note. And the whole note is called the whole note because it lasts the whole measure. It gets 4 beats. And on this exercise, we're going to be counting just the length of each note. So I'll do the first 2 measures as an example, and then let's clap along together. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, for example. Now let's try that together. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Wolfie really doesn't like when I do this, and he feels that he needs to be here to comfort me because obviously something is going wrong if I'm sitting around clapping. Now this one looks really simple, and basically it is pretty simple, but we have it here for a reason. You'll see why in just a minute or two. But I also want to show you something different, another way that you can count. Our music is always divided into measures. The most common is 4 beats per measure. That's what we have here. So we have 4 beats and then we have a line. It doesn't matter the quantity of notes. Sometimes it's just 1 whole note like we saw on the slide before, or 2 half notes. Or in our last measure here, there are only 3 notes, but the note values add up to 4, always, without exception. And another thing that we can do is we can count those 4 beats as we go through the measure. So now, instead of counting 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you need to make sure that your clapping lines up with the note value. So it's pretty straightforward because it's only quarter notes until we get to the last measure. So you're clapping on every single beat, but it's a valuable exercise. So let's give this a try as well. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I promised that the rhythm thing would make sense, and now you're about to see why we use that specific rhythm. We're learning the piece Ode to Joy by Beethoven today, and this piece uses exactly the same rhythms from the second rhythm drill that we just had. We're going to dive more into reading music in a minute, but for today, we're using what I call pre-reading music. It's not on the staff yet. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with reading music and applying that directly to playing right away. We're starting with this structure. I do include the score in your workbook. So if you've already had some experience with reading music, you want to try it out using the score, by all means, have at it. But don't feel pressured to do that. For today, we're just using these pre-reading scores. And so you have every single note, the rhythms are all there, it moves up and down based on the direction of the notes, but you have the letters written into the note head of every single note. So that simplifies the learning process a little bit. In the long term, that's a much slower way. You can't learn really complicated music with that style of reading, but this also kind of forces you to think directionally, which I also want you to be doing. There are a lot of reasons why we're using this type of score for today. Another reason is that we can use exactly the same notes for both hands. I want you to start with the left hand just because I think the poor left hand gets neglected sometimes. So we're going to learn Ode to Joy. We're starting with our third finger on E. Because it's pre-reading, it actually doesn't tell you which octave you need to play in. So you could play low, you could play really low, you could play high with the left hand is not particularly comfortable. I'm playing on the E right below middle C, but you're free to choose to play wherever you wish. So we're starting with E, and then we have E, E repeats, F, G, G repeats, F, E, D. So let's go that far. And then we have, so that gets us halfway through the first line. Then we have C, C, D, E. And then here is where the only rhythmic change in the entire piece happens. E, D, D, 2. So let's try that. C, C, D, E, E, D, D, 2. And then look at the next line and you'll see that everything except for the very last measure is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is instead of the last measure being E, D, D, 2, it starts on D and moves to C, and the C repeats. So let's try the whole line nice and slow. E, E, F, G, G, F, E, D, C, C, D, E, D, C, C, 2. How we broke this piece down right now is how I want you to be approaching all of the music that you ever learn. I want you to be looking before you leap. So look at the music before you start, see where you're starting, see what your fingerings are, see what the position is, and then immediately start looking for patterns and immediately start looking for ways to break it down. How can I break down this big chunk of information so that it's digestible, so that it's not too much information all at once? With the first row, we took half of the row and then the other half. And then when we started the second row, before we started, we looked at the patterns, we realized, it's just the end that's different. And so then you can practice just the very end of that row because you've learned everything else that you need for that row. And then you're ready to play all the way through. So let's play all the way through Ode to Joy now, just with the left hand. Rhythms are all clear. We've clapped that and counted that already. The fingering, you use all 5 fingers, and I would really, again, encourage you to say the note names, say the note names, say the note names. What you can also do is start to say the finger numbers. That way you're conscious of which finger is playing at any given time, and that also kind of forces you to be thinking about the direction that your music is moving. The right hand has exactly the same thing. It's just the same piece for both hands. You can even try your hands together if you really want. And the only thing to look out for is that the fingerings are then opposite. The right hand starts with the third finger just like the left hand does, but then it's not the second finger because our hands are mirror image. We've talked about this before, and it's going up. The notes are exactly the same, so the fingerings are more or less also a mirror image. I'll show you that once so that you have an example if you want to compare it, and then we'll move on. Now, we've talked about landmark notes before. In the very first piano lesson video from yesterday, we covered these landmark notes fairly briefly, but today we're going to review everything that we have here. We have these 4 notes. It's actually just 3 different notes and 3 different keys on the piano. The first one is our F below middle C. Then the 2 that are in the middle are middle C. The one in the bass clef is for the left hand, and the one in the treble clef is for the right hand. And then we have G. And this is a practical system because it's visually fairly straightforward to identify, and they're pretty well spread out on the piano pretty evenly. And so we want to make sure that we can really recognize these 3 notes instantly. Of course, long game, we want to be able to do that for every single note that's on the staff, but we're starting with these 3 so that we don't get overwhelmed. We have these points of reference. So one more time, we have F, C in the bass clef, C in the treble clef, G in the treble clef. And you do want to get used to seeing them without the colors. I like to use colors because I think when we're first starting out, it's just a lot of black and white and lines that all look the same, and it can be a bit overwhelming. So you can always in your music highlight with colors so that you can really recognize those particular lines instantly. I do want you to get used to recognizing them when they look like this too. So now let's do a little quiz. Here we have middle C in the bass clef, so the left hand's going to be playing that one. What note do we have here? We have treble clef G. And here we have bass clef F. So none of that's new. We've covered all of that before. Then the next thing we want to talk about are intervals, because we're obviously going to be playing more than just those 3 notes on the piano. And for today, we're starting with just one interval. We're talking about seconds or steps. We can call them either one. The terms are interchangeable. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. They're equal, perhaps somewhat less formal as steps, but in terms of meaning, it's exactly the same thing. And so we call them steps because we're stepping from one wide key to the next. We call them seconds because we have our first note and then the second note, and that's how far apart they are. Intervals are just measuring the distance between notes. Instead of meters or feet or inches, we measure music in intervals in terms of distance. When we're reading these steps or these seconds, what we want to notice is that it's always, without exception, line to space or space to line. It's never going to change. It's always from one line to the very next space or one space to the very next line. Now, this is how they look when we're playing them one after the other. We can also play seconds at the same time. And then they do look a little bit wonky because they only have one stem for the notes, and then the head of one of the notes always has to point in the opposite direction. They look a little bit weird. Just get used to how they look, and it also makes them easy to identify because they look weird. And so if something looks weird, you can, that's a second. Then that becomes really useful because we're going to combine that with our landmark notes And that's already going to broaden the amount of notes that we can identify on the staff. So here, our first note is our bass clef F. So we're here. And then the next note is one step higher. So from this bass clef F, we're stepping up one, and that is G. F, G. And then, of course, music goes in both directions. So we have here, we're again starting on our bass clef F, and we're stepping down one. And if we're stepping down one from F, that means the second note on this slide is E. Of course, you won't always see these with the landmark note as the first note, so do get used to seeing them the other way around too, and using the landmark notes to figure out, okay, what is this? I see that my next note is my bass clef F, and it starts one lower, so that means I'm starting on E and going up to F. The other thing that's nice about this is we can start to read directionally. You don't have to name every single note that you're reading on the grand staff. I do encourage beginning students to name the notes while they're identifying them, just because it's just like when we say the names of the keys on the piano. We're adding another layer to this conscious recognition of what the notes are. So here, again, if you ever get confused, just realize, okay, the second note's my bass clef F, and I one below that, that's an E. And we're going to apply this to every single point on the staff. So here we have middle C, it steps down. That means we go one backwards through the alphabet. So we have C, B. Here, same thing. We're starting on middle C and it's going up, C, D. Here, same thing. What's our landmark note? It's the only one that's left. It's G. And we're stepping down to F. And from G, this one's maybe a little bit tricky just because it is the turnaround point with the musical alphabet. So we have G, and then the alphabet starts over on A. And so with this system of identifying the landmark notes and using that to help us find other notes that are right next to them, you can actually identify all of these notes now. Of course, it's not automatic yet, but I really want you to be able to recognize F, C, and G automatically. And if you have those really down pat, then the other ones are going to come more easily. In the very first piano lesson video, I just gave you the letters for the notes that you need for Amazing Grace. Today, I'm giving it to you in the same pre-reading form that we learned Ode to Joy with, just so that you can start to think a bit more about rhythm while you're playing, so that you have a better visualization of what's happening with the notes. We do have one or two types of notes that we haven't looked at before. We have eighth notes, that's just where it goes a bit faster, and we have dotted half notes. That's a half note plus one beat, so that means that the dotted half notes get 3 beats instead of 2, but I think you'll be okay as you work through that. Actually, there are 3 new things. We have the eighth notes, we have the dotted half notes, and we have some ties. That just means that notes that have this little curve underneath them, connecting them, they're tied together, and we count the 2 notes as if it were one note that's tied together. It's all one long thing. I'm playing from memory, so I don't have it in front of me right now. I know the very end is 6 beats, and there's somewhere in the middle that's also a bit longer where there's another tie. You already know how to play this piece, so I'm just going to walk you through it really quickly, and then you can head off to practice. G, C, 2, E, C, E, 2, D, C, 2, A, G, 2, G, C, 2, E, C, E, 2, D, G, 2, 3, 4, 5, E, G, 2, E, C, E, 2, D, C, 2, A, G, 2, G, C, 2, E, C, E, 2, D, C, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it for today. Congratulations, you've completed day 1 of this 14-day challenge. Let me know in the comments if you're participating, if you've invited a friend, and if you have any questions about today's lesson. I'll be sure to answer you, to get back to you with any questions that you might have. And until tomorrow, happy practicing.